for the first time in a really long time, all of the SEC coaches are returning for 2025. So all 16 coaches, head coaches, will be back. But that doesn't mean that there aren't some on the hot seat. So I want to talk about it. I think obviously I'm a Gator fan. Coach Napier spent a lot of the year on the hot seat, and truly that seat cooled as the season got to probably the last third of the season. And for two reasons: Florida started winning and recruiting picked up. And I guess maybe the third reason is that our athletic director told us he's not going anywhere. So, the seat just cooled by maybe nobody's doing but the athletic directors. But winning happened, recruiting happened, chilled a little bit. But I do also think, DJ Lagway, everybody wants to see what can be done with Lagway with a full year as the starter. And it's still got to be do or die for Napier, though, right?
Yeah, his seat definitely cooled.
When I say do or die, I mean improvement. I don't mean like he's got to make the playoffs or win a championship or he's getting fired. I just mean there's got to continue to be incremental improvement.
Yeah, no, they looked a lot better. Like for all the warts or all the things that
Yeah.
they came out with really good wins, and they were competitive in some games that nobody really thought they would be competitive in. Now, the Tennessee game is probably like half his fault, but he was still playing with a true freshman on the road. And the Georgia game, if Lagway doesn't go down, who knows, right? Like they had a chance in that one for sure. And so
it could have gotten to 10 wins this game. And again, or this season, I don't want to play coulda, woulda, shoulda. I don't love that, but they're a few plays away from winning 10 games this year.
So with him, I wonder, we talked about all the reasons why he might not get fired earlier in the year, and a lot of that had to do with the athletic director. I'll ask you because you may have a better view on it than I do. Has the athletic director's seat cooled some too because of the way the football kind of kicked up there at the end? Basketball's doing really well. Like,
I almost feel like
cooled some?
it's on pause right now, kind of. I think, basketball is clicking on all cylinders. They did lose to Kentucky yesterday, but, this is a top 10 team that's going to make some noise in March. Now, what could change that is, this investigation, going on from the Title IX stuff. So, if that doesn't go the way that Florida is hoping it could go, I think then you're looking for a basketball coach and you're looking for an athletic director, because I don't really know how one goes down without the other. But for the moment, it feels like his seat has cooled a little bit because football has improved and we're at a situation where we're at least going to see another year. Hopefully we see another year and it makes us want to see another 3 years, but time will kind of tell on that. But they got the quarterback of the future in, and the football team is winning. Baseball is slotted to be one of, the best programs in the country yet again when, first pitch happens in the spring. So you've got to think for the moment it's calm.
We need to go to another baseball game together this year. But yeah, no, I agree. If Strickland's around in 26, then I think Napier's around in 26, right? Like that, they would go hand in hand.
UF doesn't have a president currently. They have an interim president at the moment. And I've actually been told that it may not be until 2026 that UF has a president. And some of that has to do with the fact that some of the candidates that they're looking for with other jobs have commitments until that point. And the person that told me that's pretty well connected. And I thought that was kind of interesting, but that is a factor in all of this too. An interim president has made it incredibly clear that they have no interest in firing an athletic director, right? So Strickland doesn't have a whole lot of pressure on him to fire a football coach. It doesn't behoove him to make a change there. I think it just makes him even more on the chopping block when a new president comes in. So we may just really be in wait and see for a whole nother year at this point.
Yeah, like I don't really see. Unless they just go, 3-9 or something, or really like 5-7 would be pretty depressing for UF next year. But yeah, if they go under 500, even 6-6 would maybe be like a question mark. Like, what happened? Was there an injury at the top, or like what? How did you go 6-6 right now with all the hype that they've got, heading into 25? So yeah, I that seat has cooled, but they play Miami kind of early. They play Texas kind of early. Like it could, it could certainly heat back up if they don't get off to a good start. And their schedule was tough this year. It's tough next year too. So
Yeah.
if they start poorly like they did last year, I don't know that it'll be the same grace that they got this time, that he got this time. So, but it has definitely cooled. Like his seat is not nearly the hottest in the conference.
No, somebody who may have the hottest seat in the conference, though, may be Brett Venables at Oklahoma, which is not something I would have thought I said, but Oklahoma was incredibly disappointing this year in their first season in the SEC, and obviously it's hard to follow a legend, and DeBoer is seeing that at Alabama right now, and so this is hard for Venables, but I don't know. What do you think there?
Yeah, listen. I would try not to put too much into bowl games either, but they went out and beat at the time number 7 Alabama, and I thought he gained back like all the favor. Right? They beat Alabama. They held him to 3 points. That was a
Sure.
huge win for him. And then they come out and get blown out by LSU the next week. And
Yeah.
then again, not trying to put too much into one singular game in a bowl game where a lot of guys are out, but then you go out and lose to Navy in a bowl
Yeah.
game as a favorite. Like
Yeah.
you're not getting fired over a bowl game. Like that's just not happening. The people don't
Sure.
really care that much. But it's a microcosm of their whole year. They weren't competitive against Texas, their biggest rival. They weren't competitive against South Carolina. They lost by double digits to Ole Miss. Lost to Missouri, who was, finished at 10-3 actually, but Missouri was so up and
Yeah,
down.
but we talked leading into this season how Missouri could essentially sleep and
Right.
should go 10 and
Missouri
2.
Missouri had just gotten blown out by A&M, and then they go and beat Oklahoma. I mean, shoot, they barely beat Tulane and Houston earlier
Yeah.
in the year, right? And so, yeah, no, his seat is hot.
Excuse me, Tulane is a juggernaut.
Tulane was pretty good this year. All their guys like got stolen away to other programs, but yeah, I mean, if he doesn't make a bowl next year, or if they don't go at least, I don't know. To me, they've got to go
They
7
got to win 8
5 at least.
games, I think.
Yeah, like they can't even go 6-6. If they
The
go 6-6,
standard at
I think they're
Oklahoma
fired
is
up.
just higher than it is most places, and
It is. Yeah, they're used to winning. Doesn't
they are.
Oklahoma have the most like national, like they're up there, man.
They're
Like,
up there. They're
and
blue blood.
so it's not like Texas who came in here and like I mean, I think Texas won 2 Big 12 titles in 12
Oh
years.
yeah, Oklahoma had
Oklahoma
been dominant
dominated the Big 12.
for decades.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so they're not used to this. And I know it's the SEC and I know every week all this stuff, but you can't lose to Missouri. And you can't,
Yeah.
I mean, it's not even the every week's a battle thing when you're barely beating Houston, right? Like
Yeah.
that ain't the
Right.
SEC beating you up. That was
Right.
week 2, man. Like, come
Right.
on. So
That
this
was
wasn't
supposed to be your off week.
yeah. I mean, in Oklahoma in other years would still be in their good years, they're at worst like a 9-3 SEC team,
Yes.
right? Like they might lose to one they shouldn't, and then lose to the Georgias and Bamas, and then they're winning the rest of their games. They should never
Yes.
be losing to Missouri or
Correct.
Ole Miss or South Carolina. And I know Ole Miss and South Carolina had good years, but come on, man, like you got to be
Except
competitive in
Missouri.
these
But
games.
yeah, you got, and I think part of it is not even being competitive in some of them as well. What about Mark Stoops at Kentucky? I think we have joked for years. When Napier was on the hot seat earlier this year and towards the end of last season as well, there were Gator fans mentioning like, shoot, do we want Stoops? Because he had dominated Florida for 3 years in a row. But it seems like potentially the honeymoon is kind of coming to an end there, which I find interesting because I have always maintained one of the best jobs in the country. They'll pay you whatever you want. You need to win between 8 and 9 games a year and everybody's happy. If you get more than that, then you're overachieving and they're going to bonus you or whatever. Like you can do what you want and you have essentially lifetime job security. Didn't feel like that this year though. I think Kentucky fans are a little bit over Stoops. It seems like Stoops is a little bit over Kentucky fans. Like, is the seat hot here?
It's hard to judge this one because, like, who could they realistically hire that's better than
It's
Stoops?
better than Mark Stoops.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like it would just be it would be a step to me, and I don't know how many Kentucky fans will watch this, so maybe it doesn't matter. But to me, it would be a stepping stone job. Like they could go get a really good coordinator from a high level SEC team or
Who's
a
going to
really
stay for 2 to 3 years.
yeah.
do their
Like
work,
okay,
and
here's
go.
one. Could they go get Fran Brown had a great year this year. Won 10 games first year at Syracuse. They won 10 games at Syracuse. Like let that sink in. Came from Georgia. He could get a job at Kentucky and be good for 2 or 3 years and then he's off, right? Like I mean, let's just call it what it is. Now, I will say Is there a possibility that, and I guess we really haven't answered the question here. Is there a possibility that Kentucky could invest in their program to get it to where it's at an Ole Miss level, at a
Yeah.
consistent
Yeah.
like
I
level
think
that's kind of
so.
respectable? I don't think they could ever get to, your upper echelon of LSU, Bama, Georgia, Texas, Oklahoma, Florida when they're playing well. I don't think he could ever get there. But could they get to that Ole Miss level? And so
Yes.
if so, you could turn that in. But even then, like Lane doesn't seem like a lifer at Ole Miss. Like that's still kind of a
Yeah.
somebody big comes calling, he's out. So I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't think you're going to do better than Mark Stoops. I think if you're smart, you're maybe investing in NIL and you're letting Stoops be that person that takes you to the next level, which I do think Kentucky has invested some in NIL, but I also know they've got a lot of big money up there that, they could probably do more with, right?
Yeah.
But it seems, I don't know. It seems unrealistic to think that you're getting somebody to come in for more than a couple years that can do a better job than Stoops. And with Stoops, as long as you keep him happy, he's going to be there till he retires. And there's something to be said about the job security because you never know if the next guy's going to be better or worse than what you had. And in
Yeah.
Kentucky's, I don't know. In Kentucky's case, it's hard to picture it being better. So, what about another coach that was on the hot seat leading into this season? And, I guess the jury's maybe still out is Sam Pittman at Arkansas.
Feels like Billy Napier to me.
Yeah.
With less expectations. I don't think Arkansas has the
There's less
expectations.
expectations.
But they fought incredibly hard for him. They were supposed to lose. Like they beat Auburn. They were supposed to lose that game in the preseason. They beat Tennessee when Tennessee was number 4 in the country. That game slid under the radar because it's the same day that Vandy beat Bama. But people forget Arkansas beat Tennessee. Were they down 14-0 and still beat them? So they beat them. They blew out Mississippi State, which again, how much credit are you giving them for that? I don't know. It's Mississippi State. But man, they barely lost. They lost to Texas by 10.
Yeah.
And then they went out at 6-6 and blew out Texas Tech as an underdog in their bowl game. All of their guys opted out. Nobody playing, or not opted out, but like in the portal, opt out, injury, this, that, and the other. Arkansas had a skeleton roster and went out and played their butts off and beat the tar out of Texas Tech, who was supposed to beat them. And just kind of the way that the guys played hard for Billy Napier.
They play hard for Sam
Pittman. Yeah, so to me, it's still just on pause. If they go 4-8 next year, he's going to get fired.
They've done a decent job recruiting. I feel like Arkansas is a pretty difficult place to recruit to in the SEC when you just think about who all you're going up against for that same talent, right? But I do feel like Arkansas has done decent recruiting as well.
Yeah, and so I don't know. It's kind of like it's tough to be a mid-level team in the SEC or mid to bottom level team in the SEC, right? Like we talked about earlier, how every week really is tough. You have to get up. If you're Tennessee, you can lose to them. If you're Texas, you can only beat them by 10. Like those things happen.
Yeah.
And you lost to a team in the semifinals and another team you beat that was in the playoffs and you went 7-6, right? Like that's just kind of, but yeah, I mean, to me, he's still just kind of on pause. Seat's not as hot. They'll go into next year with a little bit of excitement, a little bit of like, hey, can we sneak 8 wins out? Can we get to, a point where we play these teams really competitively again and do a little bit better? I don't have a lot of confidence that they can, but Arkansas didn't have to play. We talked about schedules. Arkansas didn't have to play Georgia or Alabama this year.
Yeah.
And so they don't next year either. They will have to play Texas. But again, if there's going to be a way that you could potentially find your way to 8 wins, not having to play Georgia and Alabama is a great way to do it.
It's a good way to start. Absolutely. They don't have to play Florida either. Not that,
I'm not putting them on the same level. Okay. Sorry.
What about Hugh Freeze at Auburn? I think this is something that's interesting. I feel like he's similar to Coach Napier in that the seat's maybe a little bit cooler now than it was at the midway point of the season, but rougher start than Harsin, who they canned after 2 years, right? And so I don't know. And Auburn has very, very little patience and a very, very loud and powerful booster group.
This feels like Billy Napier 2.0 to me. Year 1, underwhelm. Year 2, underwhelm. Year 3 is the prove it year. And Billy did a great job in Florida did a great job in the second half of this year, but it certainly didn't start out very well. This is like that. This is that year 3 for Hugh Freeze. Yeah. Like they've got all the talent in the world. They went out and they got this quarterback. I'm not super thrilled with getting the Oklahoma transfer to come in. We'll see how he does. But to me, it feels like what this year felt like for Napier. You got to
Yeah,
go out
and
and prove it, or we're going to fire
even
you.
even from the PR perspective, I think too, because I know there were several times when Hugh Freeze this year in post game press conferences, essentially blamed his players for not executing well. And when I say Coach Napier, I'm not saying Coach Napier says that, but I feel like that he has had some PR blunders over the course of his 3 years at UF, and this feels similar to that, where you know fans don't maybe want you to throw the players under the bus. They want you to stand up there and take accountability as the coach making almost $8 million a year to get wins. I don't think that helps in this situation.
Yeah, and so he's got to. I don't know. They got to prove it this year. They had, and they were so close, man. Like they went 5-7, but they had I mean, just I don't even know why you're throwing the ball there. They had a game-ending pick six against Oklahoma. Is why they lost that game. That was, I
Yeah,
think, that was the same Saturday that I was up in Tuscaloosa, watching it on the bar before the game, and then they blew it against Missouri too. Like they had a late lead against Missouri, and I think with like less than a minute to go, Missouri drove down the field and beat them. They lost to Vandy by 10 in a game they only scored 7 points, and I know Vandy was better this year than normal, but still.
yeah,
You're playing Vandy at home. You can't score 7 points, right? Like you gotta, Vandy wasn't known for their defense this year, right? Like they, the team that Oklahoma held to 3 points in Alabama, put up 40 plus on them when they played Alabama. So yeah, they were so close. I mean, if they win those 2 games, if they win 2 of those 3, then they're 7-5. You get to a bowl and you win that, like Florida did, and you feel much different about this year. And so their quarterback play was really bad. We didn't ever do a segment on this, but this was the first year in forever since before Saban was there that 0 of the top 10 players from the state of Alabama signed with Alabama. Like
yeah,
6 of them signed with Auburn. And so, yeah, like the talent's there, right? The
yeah.
quarterback question is still a question to me. But if they figure out the quarterback, then this has to be the year that they go out, and again, they do play Alabama and Georgia every year, which makes it
Yeah.
tough, but there's no Texas on this. There's no LSU on this. Like you play a manageable schedule outside of those 2 games, which are incredibly tough. I get it. You get Alabama at home this year, which is a help. It's always weird on the plains, but this is the same thing to me as Napier was this year. This is the prove it year.
You mentioned the recruits in the state of Alabama signing with Auburn. Let's talk for a minute what I would say is a secondary tier to this. Okay, so we talked about Napier and Venables and Stoops and Pittman and Freeze, and I feel like those are probably the warmest seats. And maybe it's a toss up whose is the warmest. But the next kind of tier, which is like the we're insane fans and we just need more tier, would be Kalen DeBoer and Brian Kelly. So, DeBoer didn't make the playoffs this year. That is his cardinal sin here, right? They didn't make the SEC championship game and they didn't make the playoffs. They barely missed the playoffs. And Alabama fans are already kind of over him. And, we've talked in previous stories on this channel, but also just in our friendship over the years about how you never want to be the person that follows the legend. You want to be the person who follows the person who follows the legend. And so is Kalen DeBoer just doomed to fail because he's coming directly after Nick Saban?
I don't know if doomed to fail is the right thing, but he'll never live up, right? Like there's nothing if he retires as the GOAT, then he can live up, right? But he'll never live up, right? They could win 2 titles over the next 10 years. And for any other college, like if I offered you 2 titles right now for over the next 10 years, you would take literally anything. Like you could probably offer most college football fans like, hey, you're going to win a title next year, but then the next 5 years, you're not going to make a bowl. Most college football fans would take that. Like I would take that like immediately. Like I wouldn't even think about it.
I don't know.
So,
Alabama fans
different expectations. Yeah, like
the promised land on such a regular basis for so long that I don't know.
Going to be good enough for them.
Yeah.
So again, I don't think he's doomed to fail. I just don't know. I think he didn't just get to Alabama and forget how to win, right? Like I think he was kind of handcuffed with their quarterback situation this year with Milroe, who I just don't think is very good. I didn't think he was very good last year. Incredibly athletic, incredibly talented, but yeah, I think he was kind of, this was a tough year in year 1. They barely missed the playoffs. Again, not making too much of one bowl game.
Yeah.
But for them to lose to Michigan in such embarrassing fashion and have all the turnovers in the first half, Michigan was a 2 touchdown dog. If they'd have won that game, and kind of finished on a high note, finished with a little bit of positivity. Again, bowl games mean very little, but it just when you just kill yourself over bowl losses when you did finish the way they did. And Ole Miss gets to kind of, hey, we beat the tar out of our opponent. That's why we should have been in. DeBoer's like, everybody says, see, that's why we didn't put you in, right? Like that, you were a 2-touchdown favorite against a Michigan team that was completely depleted and had a backup quarterback in. Then that quarterback gets hurt and you still found a way to lose. It just, he's not nearly on the hot seat. He could go 8-4 next year and he's not getting fired. So it's not like a hot seat conversation, but it's like we're pissed. We're Alabama fans and we're pissed because you didn't go 17-0, right? Brian Kelly's the one that's interesting to me because outside of LSU, where they've had a crap ton of talent and they just can't find a way to win enough big games, right? Lose to Florida State both the first times to start. I think they've lost 5 straight season openers. And guess what? They open up at Clemson next year.
Well, and that's not just a Brian Kelly problem because it's not like
for sure. Yeah.
5 years.
But 3 of the 5 for sure are him.
Yeah.
They were favorites in both those Florida State games. They were they had USC this year, who wasn't very good. And they found a way to lose that game on a neutral site as a favorite. And so, I just and again, they're going to be a dog going to Clemson next year to open up the year. And it'll probably be 3 or 4 points. It's not like it's going to be Clemson minus 10 or anything, but they're going to be a dog again. And if they lose another season opener with Nussmeier coming back, who had Heisman odds this year, he'll have Heisman odds again next year to start the year. I don't know. But outside of all of that, outside of everything they've done, they've done less with more, right? How much does Marcus Freeman taking Notre Dame to the semifinals impact and beating Georgia?
Change how you think about Brian Kelly, because that's essentially what he told us when he took the LSU job, is he needed to go somewhere where he was going to have the resources to be able to win a national title, and kind of made it seem like, the academic standards at Notre Dame made it next to impossible. The unwillingness to, bend in other areas made it just unlikely in today's college football world that you were going to win. Now, to be fair to Brian Kelly, when that happened, that was right on the cusp of NIL starting, right? And I'm not saying LSU doesn't have a ton of money, because they have huge boosters, but Notre Dame, when they want to, is got to have some of the most money of anybody in the country if they're willing to put it towards the, the right things for them to be successful. But Marcus in just a short amount of time, having the kind of success he has, kind of blows holes in the whole Brian Kelly, saga.
Yeah. And, I don't know. I think he's been fine at LSU. They've obviously recruited very well. Sure. They've done very well in the portal. There's so much talent that's playing well on Sundays. They've got some of the best young wide receivers in the league right now that you can even imagine, that both played under Brian Kelly. Shoot, they had the Heisman winner who is killing it in the NFL right now for Washington. Yeah. And so when you look at all that, you just think like, man, how did you go 9-3 last year? Right. Yeah. And in their losses, they got, this year they get blown out by an okay, above average, but like an okay by their standards, Bama team. Last year they get blown out by Florida State. They're some of their losses you just look at and you're like, they go to Texas A&M and lose. Yeah. And again, Texas A&M, lost 5 games? Like, this is just, it was weird to me, or not, it is weird to me that like, they just always, the big game, here's the one for you. We talk about James Franklin and all these people that lose the big game. Like Brian Kelly's the one losing the big games that he's not supposed to. Yeah. He's the one that has to turn that around. Now, again, I'll say this, they go 8-4 next year. I don't know that he is safe, right? Like I think they need to be better than 8-4 next year. And I'm not saying that, there were people this year that were saying once they had lost to A&M and certainly when they got blown out by Bama, now they rebounded well, but I think there were people this year that were saying like, what the heck are we doing here, man? You've got more talent than they've got a top 10 roster every single year. Why do you keep going 9-3, 8-4? Like you just got to get better.
Yeah. So how many of these coaches are back in 2026?
So 16, right? Outside of coaches potentially leaving for other jobs, like I wouldn't count it. Like if Lane was to leave for a bigger job, like I wouldn't count that, right? Certainly, I don't think like the wheels would have to insanely come off for like, DeBoer is not going anywhere. Obviously Kirby Sark are not going anywhere. Mississippi State, they're not moving on. Clark Lay is not moving. Shane Beamer seems pretty entrenched there. I think, I would even lean toward Napier coming back in 26. I'll say 13. I'll say 13 coaches come back. Like I'll say 3 coaches get fired, retire, whatever you call it. Like I could see Pittman saying like, I've had enough of this. Like I'm out of here.
Yeah.
Pulling them out, maybe even pulling like a Malzahn, like I can kind of read the writing on the wall. I'm going to go over this other school before I get fired, So not counting coaches taking different jobs. Like if Lane leaves or something else, that doesn't count.
Right.
Coaches getting fired or knowing they're getting fired, whatever, retiring, I'll say 13. What about you?
I'm going to say 14 are back.
Who are your 2 to go?
I kind of think it's going to be Venables and Hugh Freeze.
Oh, I forgot about Venables. Yeah. He's in my 3. But yeah.
That's my guess there. Thanks so much for watching this clip from our live show of a peek inside SEC football. If you enjoyed this content and would like to support, we'd love to have you subscribe. We are live every Sunday evening, and we'll be back for another episode soon.